Since the dawn of warfare, leaders and generals have recognized that one of the most important and yet overwhelmingly boring aspects of warfare is the field of logistics. Napoleon stated that an army marches on its stomach, and Sun Tzu said that the line between order and disorder is logistics. There has never been a fight, from the most basic tribal conflicts to both global wars and every insurgency and guerrilla war in between. In none of these conflicts did the loser lose because they had outstanding logistics. Oh no, quite the contrary. Most wars are fought and lost due to logistics than any other singular cause. As such, entire libraries, research centers, and companies have been created over the past millennia with the goal of studying and improving military logistics. Well, you might be asking, why does this matter to me? And the answer to that question is quite simple. For one, we have to remember our current political, social, and economic situation. And this might be hard to hear for some people, but I will be direct and not mince words in the interest of time and speaking plainly. As is the case with most of our other videos, we feel compelled to again point out that our political and senior military leadership have stated countless times that our biggest threat is not Islamic terrorism or attack by a foreign nation or something like that. Oh no, their biggest enemy is you, the average citizen. We must not forget what the nature of the relationship between citizens and government has become. Right now, for the U.S. government, their biggest enemy is the people. Also, the recent Colonial Pipeline gasoline shortage was a big wake-up call for a lot of people, considering how gasoline was non-existent for the majority of the East Coast. Considering the severity of this attack on our homeland, one might think that the federal government would do something, right? Nope. There was no significant federal assistance during this crisis. The national law enforcement entities and exact agencies that are supposed to respond to specifically cyber attacks didn't feel the need to get involved until after the entire network of pipelines had been shut down for several days. FEMA did not send any trucks to help shuttle fuel during the outage, and the only help the federal government provided was in the form of refraining from arresting truck drivers for working too many hours or having overweight trucks. And perhaps most telling, not one strategic reserve was opened. Government forces had their reserves, so why should they help out the rest of the nation? So the concept of logistical frameworks and supply methods are absolutely critical to understand, particularly in a world in which the United States has never been more vulnerable. But the various powers that be are also completely incapable of providing even basic goods and services in an emergency situation. Thus, we, the average citizen, must start thinking about how we can build logistical networks that can survive not only attacks from an external actor, but also attacks from our own governmental forces. This idea is very important to understand, because it will force us to adapt a non-traditional logistical system. In years past, your local volunteer groups and charity drives didn't have to worry about being targeted. From traditional disaster preparedness organizations to the efforts of small religious institutions, either organized at the highest levels of government or at the lowest levels within a small community. These groups never had to worry about being targeted, but they most certainly do now. The concept of covert and clandestine disaster preparedness is most certainly the latest chapter in the story of our time. Currently, our nation's logistical networks barely work under the perfect conditions and without any adversarial actions and in a permissive environment. So when trying to supplement that logistical framework with a clandestine network of supply chains, which have to operate in a non-permissive environment, this becomes a logistical nightmare. UPS, FedEx, DHL, Amazon, and especially the U.S. Postal Service have a whole host of luxuries that we do not. The most significant being that they can operate with uniforms and brightly colored trucks, and they have storage depots and regional hubs that do not have to be hidden or concealed. And there are a whole host of laws that protect not only the workers in the company, but also the actual cargo itself. But an underground logistical network does not have any of those luxuries. So let's go down a list of the considerations that we must take when considering setting up our own logistical networks. First up is the legality. In a tale as old as, well, Karl Marx, an attitude is emerging among the federal government which seems to promote the idea that we cannot solve a problem because if we solve a problem, we admit that there was a problem in the first place, and there cannot be any problems under the current regime. You must not be a prepper because if you prepare for a bad situation, you logically admit that that situation might actually occur, which is impossible under our glorious leader's regime. See how that works? Granted, that's a biased way of explaining it, and things aren't quite that bad just yet, but as always, we make videos for the future, not the present. And in the future, we will definitely see preparedness being discouraged. It's even happening right now. We are already seeing the federal regime promoting farmers to not grow food, just like we are seeing sketchy billionaires buying a lot of water rights and suddenly become cattle farmers overnight. So in the future, we have to understand that survival itself might be illegal, which leads into our next topic of the morally dubious nature of the work. An underground logistics network will require people to travel long distances with incriminating evidence. As one can quite easily see, this is already happening in one major career field, drug trafficking. An underground logistics network will require people to learn the tactics of and operate just like major drug cartels and other criminal organizations, which will be distasteful for a lot of people. A lot of people tend to imagine the collapse of a society and eagerly watch YouTube videos on what to do when the apocalypse happens. But here's the deal. Long before a nation collapses, and especially if there is a partial collapse, which is far more likely, ordinary people will have to traffic Tylenol and gasoline, just like the cartels traffic cocaine and heroin today. It is far more sexy for one to imagine themselves strapping on their kit and wandering around the wastelands than it is for someone to imagine themselves hopping in the back of a minivan and driving around National Guard checkpoints with a cargo of infant formula and potatoes. But the latter scenario is much more likely to happen, and based on the shortages that we've seen over the past year, from diapers to gasoline, this situation has already started to happen in limited cases. But because it isn't sexy to think about and plan for, the vast majority of people will not be capable of seamlessly switching over to a clandestine underground logistics framework when or if the time comes that such a system is needed. Up next is willing personnel. As is the case with most resistance or civilian-run organizations over time, nobody is going to do this stuff full-time. Even if they wanted to, not many people will be making enough money to run a clandestine logistics chain full-time. The vast majority of people will be moving cargo in their off-time, or as a result of convenience. Everyone naturally does this on a low level anyway. A friend asks you for a ride home because their car broke down, or a neighbor asks you to drop off a package of goods to a family member across town since you're already planning to head that way anyway. This is the perfect beginnings of a highly efficient network that can easily go underground because nobody knows about it anyway. Next is the compartmentalization. Due to the nature of clandestine work, the entire process will have to be compartmentalized. Everyone involved will have to be insulated from everyone else, so that if one person gets arrested for breaking curfew in order to bring supplies to a family member, they will not be capable of incriminating anyone because simply they don't know the rest of the network. This ensures the survivability of such a network. Next up is the extensive knowledge of tradecraft. Nobody is going to have to LARP as Jason Bourne, but it would be essential for everyone that has a hand in logistical operations to have a decent knowledge of various tradecraft. Understanding how to set up and service dead drops, how to detect and evade surveillance, and various other little counterintelligence techniques will be essential to making sure that your network doesn't immediately get compromised. Next is the ability to operate in a non-permissive environment. Echoing a sentiment that we try to hammer home every single day, people that participate in clandestine work like this will need to be crafty. They will need to be the best of the best. Again, we have said it many times before, but if we have a person who is learning, taking advantage of everything he or she is given, and is able to thrive and operate with zero support, minimal gear, and almost no outside resources, this person will 100% be an asset that is very valuable. However, if a person is incapable of understanding even basic OPSEC, cannot control themselves or their emotions online where everything is logged and nothing is secure, who is obsessed with tactical gear but unwilling to read a book, or is a liability in so many other ways, we certainly would not rely on that person. A person that cannot even take care of themselves right now, when things are comparatively still pretty good, is going to be nothing but a burden on those people who are able to excel in a non-permissive environment. And finally, managing personal conflicts. We have to accept the fact that not everybody's going to get along. I think our current situation in society is proof of that. However, We cannot survive if we were only to conduct business with people who we agree with. This might change in the future, but right now we don't walk around with a checklist of our own personal beliefs plastered on a t-shirt so that before we even engage with another person we can look at their social resume, right? That's just not something that happens in a successful system. As an aside, this is also why long-term boycotts are extremely difficult to maintain in the world today. If we all were to not buy anything from a company that we disagreed with, we would all starve. And since this is the case, and when combined with other social tensions that we see all over the nation these days, we have a higher than normal chance for interpersonal conflicts to flare up. Sometimes people argue, sometimes people get mad at each other, and just generally don't work well together based on personality conflicts, which is completely normal. But we must remember that we cannot allow these types of personal squabbles to flare up in our logistical networks. Remember, a clandestine logistical network can never make a mistake. Every single mistake could be fatal or exploited by a vastly superior adversary. An adversary that can make as many mistakes as it wants when it comes to surveillance. A force that might be targeting your network only has to be lucky once, but you and your entire network have to be lucky every single day. But despite these seemingly overwhelming challenges, there's actually quite a lot of good news. For one, the framework and ideology of a citizen-run logistical system looks very different from something that a nation-state might create, and is totally alien to the logistical systems and mentality of a modern military force, which is one of the least efficient logistical networks in the entire world. So when it comes to creating a black market or underground logistical network, everyday citizens already have the upper hand. Fortunately for us, the concept of logistics is almost an instinct that is inherent to everyone. Humans are natural explorers and have been selling and trading goods and services all over the surface of the earth for millennia. Most people can attribute the success of the Roman Empire to the importance they placed on logistics. If one were to ask any random, decently educated person about what they think of when you mention the Roman Empire, what immediately comes to mind is the roads. The efficiency and superiority of Roman transportation methods and networks has become legendary over time. Likewise, most people are familiar with the Silk Road, one of the largest and heaviest trafficked trade routes of all time, and even the British Empire's global quest for spices. Human beings from every culture over history have been very crafty when it comes to logistics. However, logistical networks are very much like our own field of intelligence. It's easy for everyone to do at a basic level, but very hard to do well or at an advanced level. As such, the ability to establish a logistical network is a great divider. Those who have better logistics than their adversaries will always have the advantage.